Fine. Hello, good morning, everyone. We are not in the hall, but uh, make yourself comfortable and we begin shortly. Thank you. So today we're gonna have we have our three panelists here, and who are gonna share with us their experiences on career transitions across sector. So while waiting for more of our friends to come in, we'll just make ourselves comfortable. Grab yourself some drinks, coffee or tea. See the time. It's 2 minutes past. Okay, yeah, I think let's begin. Uh, right. So good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining the session. Very excited to have to host our three panelists here on this topic on shifting gears, navigating career transitions across sector. And this is an event by the International Health Economics Association, Early Career Researchers Special Interest Group. So yeah, before we begin, just wish everyone who celebrates happy Lunar New Year. It's the sixth day of the Lunar New Year. And we also just like to have a feel on how many people are from each region or each time zone. So if you are, I mean, it's midnight at America, it's North and South America, but if you happen to be from North or South America, can you please give a thumbs up? Anyone? Okay, no one. It's okay. We have the recording ready for them. If you're from Africa, Middle East, or Europe, you please give a smiley face. Yay, I see some smiling face. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. What about from Asia, Russia, or Asia Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, Fiji? Please give a clapping hands. Right. Thank you. Right. It's about three or four of you from Asia or Asia Pacific and Russia. Right, thank you very much. So, housekeeping before we begin. So this session will be recorded, and the recording has already started, and the recording will be uploaded on YouTube. Hopefully within a few days after the session ends later. And we're gonna have Q&A. Q&A will be done through Slido, and I'm gonna share the link in the chat now. Feel free to enter your questions. Just drop the QR code. This is the QR code for the Slido. Okay. So yeah, feel free to post your questions or upvote someone else's questions if you like them. And then yep. So in the next 90 minutes session, I'm gonna begin by briefly introducing our special interest group. Then we're gonna start the panel discussions, and we're gonna have Q&A, and we'll hear the final thoughts from the panelists or three panelists, and I'll share the feedback form to get feedbacks or comments from you on how you like or what you dislike or like about the sessions. So about the special interest group, we are a group of early career researchers who we try to organize events or activities that provides insight, guidance, and resources for early career researchers to navigate the career. This year there are four of us. It's Tiara, Clara, Gopal, and myself. Our term is from June last year to December this year. What we have done or plan to do is so this is the first public event. We have this online panel on shifting careers across sectors, and Clara, Gopal, and Tiara, they're currently interviewing several senior health economists on their career journey. And once these interviews and recordings are done and edited, they'll also be uploaded on YouTube. And we're also currently organizing the a pre-congress ECR sessions, which comprises presentations followed by feedback from senior health economists. The submissions just closed last Friday, and we're gonna share the outcome by end of February, if not mistaken. So this is the pre-congress ECR sessions. And sometime mid of this year, we're also going to start recruiting new ECR SIG co-conveners. So if you're interested to be one of the co-conveners for the ECR special interest group, just watch out for our call for applications. We should open sometime in mid of this year. How to join us, how to join the SIG. If you're a student or early career researchers, registration fee is $80 for 2 years. What you get from the registration fee by being a member is you get event notifications, advanced event notifications. You get to join mentoring programs organized by IHEA, networking opportunities, as well as leadership opportunities. And a little bit about myself. I'm a lecturer at Queen Mary University of London. I just joined the university end of August last year. And unfortunately, I'm not a shifter, like our panelists, so that's why I'm not speaking. I've been working in a university or academic settings, but I'm very excited to, which is why I'm very excited to moderate the sessions today by our panelists. And just to get a feel of where everybody is currently working, well, let me just happen. There should be a let's try. There should be a link and QR code appearing at the top. Function. It's odd. Let me try to still work. Some reason it doesn't show, but it's okay. We'll just move around. So maybe if you don't mind typing in the chat, just let us know where you currently work. One of these options. Anyone? I'll just start. So I work in academia. Solving phone. Yep, thank you very much. Thank you very much for all the responses. Yeah, it looks like most people are in academia, and a few are doing PhDs, a few consulting. Thank you. Pursuing, a few are studying. Thank you. What about this? Are you looking to shift to work in another sector in the near future? Is it yes or unsure or no? For myself, I'm actually unsure. You see a list of unsure, some yeses, still unsure. Yeah. So, right. Thank you. Thank you very much for the, yeah, depends on funding. Yeah, I think for us in academia, it's always depending on funding. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all the responses. Really appreciate it. Apologies for the technical hiccups. I don't know why the poll doesn't work. Right. So let's go to our panelists. They are our focus today. So we'll have three panelists with us. Very, very happy that they are able to join and share their experience and expertise. We have Dr. Christine Leopold from the Netherlands. And we have Dr. Brad Dobble from the UK and Dr. Christopher Rowan from Australia. Let's begin by maybe getting getting them to introduce themselves. Each of you, can you briefly introduce yourself and share a bit about your career journey transitions? Maybe start with anyone would like to go first? Maybe Christine, see you're unmute.
Sure, I can start. Ladies first. Hi, I'm Christine. I'm originally from Austria and now live in the Netherlands. So I started off after my studies in health economics at the Bocconi University. I actually started off in policy making in Austria. So I worked for the Austrian Public Health Institute, and there I joined a group that was very interested in pricing and reimbursement of medicines. We back then got an EU-funded project and built a network of pricing and reimbursement agencies in Europe, PPRI network. So it was really focused on connecting government institutions and health insurers to learn about pricing and reimbursement in Europe. And so it was more policy focused. Mostly I did reports for governments, insurers, the European Commission. But I got interested in academia and I started to pursue a professional PhD here in Utrecht, actually. So I was still working in Vienna, but at the same time started to do my academic career. It was an interesting, sometimes very difficult to navigate, because writing academic papers is very different than writing government papers. So I got into understanding how to talk to different audiences. And during my PhD, I was fortunate to go to the US and I did an internship at IQVIA and at Harvard Medical School. And I really liked that environment. So I decided to go back to Harvard Medical School after I finished my PhD, and stayed in the US at Harvard for 5 years and got to know the American academic place, and was pretty amazed in one sense by the openness and the incredible, inspiring exchange that can happen in the US. But at the same time, I was also very discouraged of how the academic life is in America. Of course, due to funding issues and the pressure that was there. And I realized that this was not for me. I also wanted to have a life and a family. And that was when I decided to go back to Europe. And I started then consultancy with a small consultancy company that is based in the UK, but we worked virtually. And I mostly worked for WHO because that's also in my past, I've done a lot for the World Health Organization. And I got into the consultancy life. Very interesting, coming from academia where you're drilled to become like an expert in a very, very small kind of field. In consultancy, everything is open. You have to become an expert in many different kind of areas. So all of a sudden, I was an expert in pricing and reimbursement. All of a sudden, I became an expert in air pollution, investment cases, and things that I had never heard about before. And to be honest, I struggled a bit with that. It was not easy. And then the opportunity popped up that I joined my old university here in the Netherlands as an assistant professor, and that's where I'm at now. Let's see where the journey will take me later. But for now, I'm happy here.
Thanks. Thank you, Christine. Maybe we should now let's hear from Christopher on his experience. Like, tell us a bit briefly about yourself and your career transitions so far.
Well, hi everyone. Thanks for coming along today. Where to start? I think I have a bit of an unorthodox, I guess, career journey to being a health economist. I started off in marine geochemistry, so a very different field, and didn't particularly enjoy it, and then kind of floundered around for a while, not sure what to do with myself. And just by chance, I ended up getting a data analyst job with a university here in Australia, where I worked with the School of Public Health in supporting some of their research. So I guess I sort of became a quasi biostatistician, and then really enjoyed being in health. I was very fortunate to be given some great opportunities working in the Pacific while I was doing this work, and sort of decided at some point I have to do a health-related degree if I want to stay here. And one, I guess, area that kept popping up was the economics of health. No matter where you went, it was always about the money. And so I decided to pursue further study in health economics. And as soon as I was qualified, I was picked up by the university I was working for and thrown straight into teaching and research, where I spent about 5 years teaching into the master's program and also doing this weird hybrid consultancy / academic health economics work, where I mostly did economic evaluation, cost effectiveness and return on investment analyses. And then eventually I kind of had enough of that and I transitioned over into government. So now I'm a senior health economist for a what we call a local health network, which is responsible for the provision of health services to the local area. And it is extremely different, which I'm sure we'll get into further detail soon. But that's where I'm at the moment.
Thanks, Christopher. What about you, Brett? Hear from you.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. My name's Brett Doble. So currently I'm Director of Health Economics for the ACE region, Australia, Canada, Europe at Kite, which is a Gilead company. We develop CAR-Ts. And it's been a bit of a journey kind of to get to this position. And to be perfectly honest, I always envisioned myself working in the pharmaceutical industry. And in fact, my first job out of my undergrad degree, which was in biochemistry, was in regulatory affairs at a pharmaceutical company in Canada. But I guess kind of working there for a few years, I quickly learned that I probably needed more education, and that's kind of why I went back to do a master's and then a PhD. And kind of when I was doing my master's, kind of got really interested in the academic, work style, enjoyed publishing papers, enjoyed kind of researching things and getting down into the fine details of things. So really enjoyed that work. Also, academia offered the ability to kind of travel anywhere. So originally from Canada, but did my PhD in Australia, and then did 2 postdocs in the UK, and then had an assistant professorship in Singapore as well. So that was a big draw for me, academic life, that I could essentially live wherever I wanted and could research kind of interesting topics. But I guess as I got more and more or further down the academic track, kind of, you come to realize some of the limitations or some of the cons, I guess, of working in academia. And probably more for personal reasons, I shifted out of academia and moved back to the UK, where my wife is from, and took up a position at NICE, working in their clinical guidelines unit as a health economist. Which was a really interesting experience. But I think I was always trying to transition back into the pharmaceutical industry. That's always where I wanted to be. And so kind of how did I get there, or how could I get there? I had to make a few moves in order to get to kind of the position I am in today. So worked at NICE for a while and then transitioned to a consulting firm called Parexel. Again, doing health economics, and then finally was able to kind of secure my position that I have now. Currently, I work remotely. I live in Scotland, and basically work with people across the world, from Australia all the way to kind of California in a day. So very interesting position and rewarding position, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that as we go along, but that's kind of my spiel.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you very much to all of you for sharing your introducing yourself and sharing a bit briefly about your career transitions. So I think all of you just now touched about a bit briefly about your why you move from one sector to the other. So I think for now, I mean, the next question from me is what I think from Brad, I think you quite clearly stated that you have been wanting to work in industry from the beginning. You make some moves in between, but for was there a point where you may have changed your, like, was it always like a plan, I mean, for all of you? Was it always a planned trajectory that these are the moves that you want to take, or like was it just like, okay, there's a stop, and then you see, and maybe you consider want to stay longer in that sector? So what motivated your transitions? Like what was the key driver for your transitions when you moved from one sector to the other? Maybe we start with we go with Brad first this time.
Yeah. So like I said, I kind of always wanted to go back to pharma, and I guess probably when I started in academia, I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. And I'll do this for a couple of years and then I'll shift back. But really enjoyed it. And I guess probably one thing that I did get caught up in is that I think in academia you can have this mindset that you're never technical enough. You don't know enough yet. And if I just do a few more years, well, then I'll know enough and I'll be the expert and I can move on, and then people will want to employ me. And so I think I got caught up a bit in that. I did enjoy academia. I enjoyed publishing papers. I enjoyed the challenge of trying to secure grants. I enjoyed mentoring students. I enjoyed teaching. But I think I did get caught up a bit. Why I probably spent, I don't know exactly how many years I spent in academia, let's say maybe 10, that I wanted to ensure that I had all the technical skills I needed in order to make that transition. So I think that was a big reason why I probably stayed in academia. Why I ended up transitioning, I think my skill set potentially, was better suited for the pharmaceutical industry. I enjoy maybe a bit more of people interaction, the strategic thinking, working with teams. And probably one thing that maybe is a bit of a misconception is the impact that you can have as well. We are kind of at the tip of the spear. We're developing the products that eventually get to the patients. And I think in academia, sometimes I thought that I would have the biggest impact, whereas I think over my time, that probably wasn't really the case. And now I feel as though I have a much larger impact simply because we're providing those treatments that directly impact patients' lives. And that's what I hoped academia would do, but I think in a number of ways it fell short of that goal.
Thank you. I see some smiles from our other panelists. So, Christopher, what about you? What was the main motivations for you to shift between, let's say, from your first job to academia and then to the government sector now recently?
So I guess when I started working within health economics, I had about a 50-50 split between teaching and research. And then as the years progressed, it was more and more teaching and less research. And it just felt that the actual application of my skills was becoming less and less, and something that I'd have to squeeze in around marking and preparing lectures and supervision and all of that fun stuff. So ultimately, I wanted to transition out of academia so that I was applying the skills full time, because I felt like I was losing them to an extent. And that was one reason for the shift. Another was that the work that I did do, I ended up being quite frustrated when I would be contracted for an evaluation, and you do your work. Is it going to be cost effective? Yes, no, and then that's it. Done. You move on. But to me, real life isn't like that. When you implement a project on the ground, it's going to not go to plan. It's going to be ever evolving and probably require some sort of monitoring and continuous evaluation. So I was also drawn to the idea of being responsible for the ongoing evaluation of services, to make sure they stay cost effective, and represent value for money in the long term. So they were probably the two factors that played the role to shift into government.
Thank you, Chris. Sorry, maybe before we move to Christine, just want to maybe would you like to share with us briefly what you do in your current job? So you're you're a senior health economist in a state government or state government office? Is that where you?
So I work for a local health, what we call a local health district here. So essentially we have a government organization that has a contract with the state government to deliver health services. My role's a bit funny because I'm the first health economist to actually work in the organization. So I walked into something where no one knew what I was doing and I didn't know what I was doing. So I've kind of had the opportunity to make it my own. And initially it was just, oh, should we do this? I don't know, ask the health economist. And I would have to attempt to try and put something together. So at the moment, even 2 years in, it's still very ad hoc in terms of what I do. Ultimately, I tend to deal with the questions from the executive that are quite political and important at the time. It's probably the easiest way to describe it.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you. What about you? What's your experience like, Christine, what motivated you to move and between one sector to the other? I think you briefly touched on it.
Yeah, sure. So, as I said, I started off in policy making, and what I really enjoyed there was actually also the interaction with all stakeholders. So I worked a lot with ministries, with health insurers, but also clinicians, industry, patient organizations. So it was really more applied, and I really, really enjoyed that a lot. And I had a secured position, so it was really a permanent thing. But at that thing, it was my first job. And to be honest, I got a bit bored in the outlook of doing that the rest of my life. And then through my PhD and the opportunity to go to America and Harvard was just exciting. And that became then my way of seeing the world and seeing something else. During the time at Harvard, as I mentioned briefly, it was, of course, inspiring, but also very kind of I was very detached from the applied side that I really enjoyed before. So I was in this ivory tower and kind of like researching things. And Brett was touching on that can happen in academia, that you just do interesting research, but it's kind of detached from any kind of real things that's going on in everyday policy making. And apart from the whole pressure that is going on in the American university systems of getting your own funding and everything like that, I really didn't like that part of being so detached from policy making. And so in the consultancy, and when we went back to Europe, the consultancy was of course much more like quicker and result driven, let's say, which I liked. I liked that fact, but the main reason why I left consultancy was I was asked to be an expert in a broad range of things where I didn't feel comfortable anymore. And then I went back to academia, even though I thought I wouldn't. But here in the Netherlands, I'm in a fortunate position that funding is quite good, even though they have cut some funding, but nevertheless, it's not a rat race like in the US. And I feel like I have only 30% teaching and 70% research. And I can actually really do the thing that I love to do, which is working with all the stakeholders. So my research is very applied. I work with, again, all industry, I work with clinicians, I work with policymakers, and try to be as close to an impact as I can be. So I enjoy that a lot too.
Thank you. Thanks, Christine. Yeah. So when you move from one sector to the other, what were the challenges that you faced? Like, do you mind sharing like what you find most challenging when you were shifting? And was there any surprises that you did not anticipate when you shift from one sector to the other? You can hear from Christine first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. I mean, shifting sectors meant for me also shifting lives, shifting countries. And in the beginning, that was quite easy because I was still by myself. At some point, I had a family, so that meant also something else. So it is a huge question if you are shifting jobs, sectors, if it also requires shifting your life. So there are lots of different levels of decision making, I think. So in terms of job-wise, shifting between the sectors, I think what helped me was, like being able to speak to different audiences. That helped. But what was challenging was to understand what's the culture of each place. So each organization has its own culture. So let's say here for me now, I've been here now a year, and just trying to observe how are decisions taken, how are people interacting with each other, how do I fit in there? I think that is always a bit of a challenge in the beginning. So finding your place within an organization, within a team, and then if you move countries, finding your place in the new country with a new language, maybe with your family, that takes a time. I think that's something I would tell everyone. Think wisely. If you're young and have no family, then just try it out. But if you have a family, think wisely and give yourself time.
Thank you, Christine. What about you, Christopher?
I think probably the most significant initial challenges was that I went into an organization that had no understanding of what health economics is and how it's different from finance. Which I was quite shocked at, because at our state level and at our national level, health economists play a very key role, and you would think that that would filter down to the provision of local services, but in my case. So that was quite challenging. There was a lot of education initially. And because I am the first health economist to be in this organization, there were no clear expectations, which is also very difficult when starting a new role in a different sector. It's not like I could come in and just start doing similar work to what I was doing in academia. It was completely different. But despite that being a challenge, it was also a positive, like I mentioned before, because I've been able to, I guess, build the role into what I want it to be, which is, I think, very lucky that I've had the opportunity to do that. Probably more broadly, some initial challenges that are ongoing is the capability and capacity for evaluation more broadly at that local level service provision. Not a lot of evaluation actually occurs. And so there's a lot of expectations, I guess, that this health economist is going to come in and be able to do everything from design to implementation to monitoring to evaluating, and then do the actual economic evaluation at the end. And then finally, there's a lot of silos. And I feel like as health economists, we tend to be quite multidisciplinary. We tend to work with a lot of different people. And it can be difficult going into an organization where these silos are very strict. And in my case, the planning team didn't talk to the finance team, which didn't talk to the data team, which didn't talk to the patient reporting measures team. And so initially, there was a lot of work just trying to meet all those people, get a network going, and get them all start to talk so that you can actually do your job.
Thank you. Brett?
Yeah, so I think my probably experience aligns a bit with Christine's, or at least how I've interpreted what Christina said. I mean, as I transitioned, I was also moving countries, going through different things in your personal life as you get older, start to have more responsibilities on the personal side as well. Getting visas is a big thing that is a nightmare. I'm almost an expert in that now, so if anyone needs immigration advice, I can probably help you out. But on top of that, I guess probably the biggest thing is kind of how organizations are run. And in my experience, academia, I guess it depends what unit you're involved in and who the leadership is within that unit, and they might run that more like a business than rather, in my experience, it kind of was just a bunch of academics working on different things who sometimes talked to each other and other times didn't. And so I guess that was my experience. I'm not saying that that's everyone's experience in academia, but the academic units that I worked in didn't really necessarily have a lot of structure. And I think that was a big shock. When I went to NICE, we were on the cusp of, there was a new leadership there. There was a shift in leadership, kind of the old guard and the new guard replacing. They were implementing kind of their 5-year strategic plan. And I was like, I don't even know what's a strategic plan. And, what am I supposed to do about this? And so I think that was one of the biggest things, is that now you fall into this organization that has these goals, and then you have to align your goals with your manager's goals, who align with and there's this hierarchy that you kind of have to report into. And, there's a culture that's built around kind of that, which in my experience was very different from what happened in academia. And I think going from NICE then to consulting, not a huge amount of culture in consulting, at least in my experience. It's almost about trying to get as much money as you possibly can. But in pharma, there's much more of a culture. There's a clear leadership, and they have a vision, and then that kind of vision needs to trickle down to all the levels within the organization. And we're all moving together towards kind of a single goal or a few goals. So I think that's very different from academia. And probably the other thing, I guess, is maybe in academia, you're used to trying to be the technical expert. And I think that's important. When I shifted to NICE, yes, I was still the technical expert. And yes, when I was a consultant, you're still a technical expert. And even today, yes, I'm a technical expert. But that's only one facet of how I operate. And almost as I've progressed, and I think this is potentially also a function of, you know, career progression in general, that technical expertise becomes less and less important. And I guess in academia had quite a large focus on trying to build up that. I mentioned that before. When was I going to be technical enough? You know, when did I think I had all the skills I needed to move out? Well, it turns out that actually I didn't need to be very technical to do, you know, the nice job, the consulting job and the pharma job. And actually there's a whole range of other skills that are far more important to progressing your career once you kind of get into these organizations. So yeah, we can talk a bit more about that in future, but I think that's kind of some of the big differences there.
Thank you. So yeah, it's a bit of personal challenges in terms of personal at a personal level where you have to move, say, your family between countries, your jobs, and also in workplace culture. Thank you. So I think the next question is relates to this. How does, I think you already touched a bit on this. How does the work culture, expectations, and the day-to-day work differ across sectors? And I think most importantly, how did you adapt to these differences between sectors? Maybe since Brett spoke last, would you mind just continuing from where you left? So differences in work culture, expectations, day-to-day jobs, and how did you adapt?
Yeah, so I think I kind of commented on this, and we can talk about going from academia to kind of NICE as a first step. So I think these two positions were quite well related. There wasn't a huge change. I went from, you know, doing cost effectiveness analysis, building models, you know, running analyses on administrative data sets to kind of doing the exact same thing. But that information, instead of kind of writing a paper on those findings, it was informing a guideline, a clinical guideline that would be then used by, you know, clinicians, nurses, healthcare professionals in the field to kind of dictate how they interact with patients. So that kind of highlights the big difference there. We went from just publishing a paper that no one reads to publishing something that actually is really making an impact and shaping how patients experience care within the NHS in England. So the work kind of didn't change. There was that technical work there. I still did it, but the output was slightly different. And then I guess how we got to the output was slightly different as well. So in academia, sometimes it was kind of just bury your head down, hammer out the analysis, write the paper. You know, there was some collaborations, but maybe not as, you know, heavily involved. Kind of just get the work done, get the paper out, and move on to the next one. Whereas in this one, there was a whole process to, you know, develop a guideline takes 2 years. There's probably about 25, you know, main stakeholders involved that we run committee meetings where, you know, information is presented to them, they comment on it, they ask you to do further analyses, you know, shaping of the questions, which questions you answer, which questions you don't answer and deprioritize. So that was a whole other element involved in that work that was actually quite rewarding and very interesting. So that was a bit of an adaptation, but I think I did enjoy that, having that extra kind of engagement with people and people asking you questions as an expert and you getting to respond in kind of these big meetings with these big key opinion leaders in the field. So that was quite interesting. But again, that's kind of a new skill set there, is that you have to be able to kind of operate in kind of a meeting setting and be able to convey probably very complex topics to people who don't know anything about health economics. They might be interested and they might not be interested. So I think that was a big change. And then maybe moving from, you know, HTA into consulting or into pharma is a much bigger step, I think. The work remains the same. I still do a lot of the same things. So in consulting, you know, you're the driver. You're doing the analysis. But I guess now I've moved up in my career in which, you know, you're overseeing people doing the analysis. But if there's ever an error or a mistake or someone can't figure something out, well, then you need to step in and kind of, develop the code or fix the error, etc. But a bigger part of that job is then interacting with the client, and making sure they're happy. And then, they put demands on you, and you need to manage those demands, manage those times, and make sure whatever you promise you can deliver in the time frame that you said. And then you're basically relying on other people to deliver those projects to a time so that you look good in front of the client. The client then comes back and wants you to do further work for them. And then I guess in pharma, it's even slightly different, where actually you may be much more strategic. You're thinking about, how do we position our product? How do we get our product reimbursed? And basically you have a budget, and you need to kind of leverage that budget to make certain things happen. So I alluded to there's being goals. You set your goals at the beginning of the year, and you need to achieve those goals. You get budget allocated to doing that. And essentially you implement a strategic vision, and you get vendors, consultants, to execute those projects, with the hope that that information, or the information generated from those projects, whether they're manuscripts, which we publish lots in peer-reviewed journals. So the work, again, is very similar, but you're potentially a little further away from it, in terms of the actual hands-on doing. But you're kind of bringing that strategic element, and then making sure that there's kind of the pull-through within your organization, so that work actually has an impact. That piece of work is then pulled through to, say, the local market in Germany, where we're struggling, and we want to pull this message out there in the field. The field reps are able to convey that message, because you've distilled something very complex down into something simple, and it helps kind of, push, increase uptake of our product in the market. So, very different things, very different skills. Some of them are a function of shifting sectors, but a lot of them are also kind of a function of just, increased responsibility, and seniority as well.
Thanks, Brett. What about your experience, Christopher? Was it how did it work out for you in terms of these changes, in terms of day-to-day work and expectations and culture?
It's been interesting, but ultimately I think refreshing and good. I guess a few of the big differences, the focus of evaluation. So when doing economic evaluation in the academic space, and I guess as health economists generally, we like to focus on outcomes, that health gain. Unfortunately, at local level provision, funding is tied to output. So the focus tends to be on financial sustainability rather than cost effectiveness. So I still get to do my cost effectiveness sort of analyses, but just because something's cost effective doesn't mean it's actually going to be financially sustainable for our service. So I've become a lot better at budget impact analysis, which has been good. But on the flip side there, while that has been a little bit challenging, and it was a bit confronting having this focus on output rather than outcome, I've been pushing the outcome part, and I've had some influence on that finally being, I guess, considered valued, which is, really, really encouraging at that level. Probably another major difference is, I guess, in academia, I felt like I had the ability to write these, nice, big, amazing reports that were detailed, lots of time to look at some evidence, synthesize all that evidence, and feel like you could put, I guess, the best case forward for change. In government, even though they move really, really slowly, you need to be able to communicate everything in, a page. So having to distill all of that evidence generation into a page where someone's going to make a decision on whether or not to disinvest from a service is challenging and very different. And I guess another point relating to that is speed. So I felt like academia would move quite slowly. You'd apply for a grant, you'd wait around for that to go through, then you move on to the next step, implement the project, and you had these, I guess, time horizons for projects of years. Often in government, I have to work very fast. We'll get a directive from our health ministry where they want a return on investment analysis done on a service and they want it done by yesterday. So you have to pull that data together as fast as possible and put, do the best that you can with, only 12 hours or something like that. And maybe the final big difference that I'll mention is, and this is still an ongoing challenge for me, is having more of a systems perspective. When doing work in academia, it tends to be quite confined. It's a very clear research question that you're answering. But when working in health economics at that local level, every decision will affect something else. So as an example, I've just finished doing some modeling for a business case to look at the economic impact of expanding some theatre services at a hospital in one of our areas. But doing so is going to reduce activity at another hospital. So the next question is, okay, so what are they going to do at that hospital? Oh, well, they're going to fill it with activity from this other hospital. And so you end up having this very convoluted and kind of gray area of where do you draw the line in terms of what's contained in your analysis and what's not. Because the decision makers, they want to know it all, but they have no understanding, I guess, of how much time and effort is going to go in and how many assumptions are going to go into trying to model out all of those changes that will reverberate through the whole system.
Very interesting. Thank you. I like what you talk about the big picture and how things relate to one another. And yeah, thank you. Christine, how was your experience about transitioning from sectors to sectors?
Yeah, so as I started off in policy, it relates very much to experiences that Brett shared with NICE. So, we had to, our work was very much with all the stakeholders. So you do make a study, but you at the same time have to bring everybody on board so that they actually implement it at some point. I love that kind of work because it's nice if you are able to write reports, but then if nobody picks it up and brings it into life, it's not worth anything. And I think what I experienced there was at times, decisions are political. So I remember I wrote a report for the ministry, which was then not deemed okay. And it was kind of like being made quiet and put in a drawer because politically they didn't want to come out with that analysis that we did. So I think that was a bit tough, that there's also political influence if you work in governmental institutions. But yeah, definitely a lot of structure, a lot of trying to involve everybody. And when I then transitioned to academia in the US, as I said, it was a silo. I was mostly doing my research, but no input from people who would use and pick up that work. And I really missed that. And I felt really detached and didn't make any sense for me. In consultancy, I mostly learned how to navigate expectations from clients. Yes, much more pressure. And also managing a team that does the analysis for you, while I was mostly managing the clients. But now being back in this academic position that I have, I feel like I can take everything on board. I'm back in the position of shaping my research from a health systems perspective with all the stakeholders that I want to work with, so with everybody, but also trying to bring in some of the knowledge that I gained in consultancy. I had to smile, Brett, when you said there are no goals in academia. Totally hear you. But I'm trying to slowly put that in there too. Why are we all doing this? What do we want to reach? Of course, it's not going to be as clear as in a pharmaceutical company, but we also have to justify more and more where we spend our money in academia. And so societal impact, and here in the Netherlands, it's not only about research output, so how much do you publish? but they also really look at societal impact. Who did you involve in your research, and what is the outcome? And I really like that question for us in academia too. What is our impact? So I'm trying to come in with some of the learnings from all other places and bring that into my academic field here too.
Thank you. And perhaps the last question before we open up the Q&A. Maybe for Christine, we start with Christine. Maybe what are the skills or expertise from your academic or research background that you find most transferable to other sectors, and any skills that you think you had to develop or enhance to succeed in your new role that is outside of academia or when you switch?
If I think back in my master's studies, to be honest, there's not a lot of skills from that I'm really taking on. It's mostly hands-on learning from work that you did. The skills that I think that helped me the most throughout all of the different jobs is people, managing expectations of people. As I alluded to before, every organization has its own culture. So I think trying to read this unspoken rules within a culture is very valuable. So it's all not hardcore rules or methods that you learn in your health economic courses or something like that. For me, it's really more these social rules actually that help navigate different organizational cultures. Because I mean, your methods you can apply, but these other things are crucial to get either information from people that you need, or to feel comfortable in a new place.
Thank you. Christopher, how was your experience on this? Like what was your what skills or expertise from your academic or research background that you find most transferable?
Probably the most important ones I'd say would be project management. I think that's a very easily transferable skill from one sector to another. I guess your typical, health economic analytical skills are still very transferable. Teaching, surprisingly, very much so. Sometimes I think I do more teaching in my current job than I did when I was actually doing teaching. But probably what I think has been the most handy is just having that research background of being, able to conduct a quick literature review, for example. So an example of that is I'm currently working on an evaluation of an aged care unit. And the business case for this unit was done well before my time. And it was not researched at all. So when it came around to evaluating it, just going straight back into academic mode of, okay, here's our problem. Where can I source the evidence from? Doing a quick lit review, looking at, all the economic evidence there is around what outputs and outcomes are measured in economic evaluations of aged care units and all of that sort of stuff. That is really, really handy. So I think that's a really good one. But I think the people management side of things, managing expectations, that's all just so important. Particularly because I feel like, at least in my career, I've unfortunately tend to be quite isolated. So in my academic role, I was the only health economist at the university, and I moved to an organization where, again, I'm the only health economist. So being able to manage those expectations of what I can do and the value that I can bring to the organization is just really, really important. Yeah.
Thank you, Christopher. So project management, teaching, people management, expectation management. Thank you. Brett, what about you? Maybe learn from your experience.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm going to say anything dramatically different than Christopher and Christine. I think what's the most transferable skill? The fact that I can pick up a newly published paper in, let's say pharmacoeconomics or value in health, a new method is being proposed or application of method. I can read it, understand it, synthesize it, communicate it, and apply it to my work. And I can do that quickly. So I think that's something that you definitely learn in school in general, but definitely in academia. So I think that's probably the most transferable skill. I mean, the bread and butter across all the positions I've ever had is kind of the exact same thing. You're doing an analysis. It's just the stakeholders involved, how you're using that information, and how it's being done is slightly different. What skills probably were lacking coming out of academia? And I mean, I think academia, in my experience, does a terrible job at facilitating people to build those soft skills, which kind of Christine has mentioned. And to be perfectly honest, the soft skills are about 90% of my job, and the technical ability is 10%. And people are willing to even trade off that 10%. So you can have 5% technical, but if you're 95%, you can work the room, you can get people to like you, you can communicate information. Those are the people that, are pushed forward into the leadership positions. So it becomes less and less about being this technical expert and more about, being a leader. And being a leader is more about the soft skills, yeah, at least in my experience, than it is about being some technical expert. I think in academia, sometimes we were trained, at least I came from an economics department, where literally the first thing you do when someone says something you disagree with is you attack. And that's like the worst thing you can do. And I have a team of highly technical, highly competent people, and we all do it. I am guilty of doing it too. I still do it. And it's bad because you cannot win people over. You don't, influence people by telling them that they're wrong or attacking, doing the direct attacking. So that soft skill, how you communicate, how you interact with people is incredibly important. And I feel as though there's not too much of training in academia. So my one word of advice would be to don't, invest in some development of those soft skills. Don't take it for granted. It's not all about being the most technical person you can possibly be.
Thank you, Brett. It's a very important reminder on soft skills. So we're gonna start our Q&A soon. I just sent the link to Slido on the chat. So I don't think I'll share the screen because we want to look at the panelists. So if you click on the link in the chat, they bring you to the Slido page, and we're gonna start with the question with the highest vote. So if you like any of the questions, keep up voting them. And we have our first question with the highest vote. This is specifically for Chris. Christopher, so as the sole health economist in your organization, how do you juggle multiple projects at one time?
With difficulty. No, I think I don't want to sound too cynical, but you can use the advantage that government takes a long time to do things. No, not really. I probably handle at the moment, I probably have 12 to 15 evaluations ongoing. And the way in which I structure them is generally I have, as I said before, I like to think of health economics as being quite multidisciplinary. We work with a lot of people. So there's often quite a few stakeholders, whether they're in our organization or supporting organization. And I generally have fortnightly catch-ups, and I just make sure that when I have those meetings, I commit to, I guess, an amount of work that is actually reasonable to do within a fortnight's time. Doesn't sound like much, but when you're managing, 10 or 15 projects, that's 10 to 15 hours a week stuck in a meeting. It doesn't give you lots of time to do stuff on the side. So small milestones to just slowly keep things ticking along is essentially how I do it. I guess the other advantage that I do have is while I am the only health economist in the organization, there is an economic team at the state level. So, and while they tend to be quite busy because they do more of the sort of the really big kind of state level evaluation stuff when submitting I guess the health department's budget submissions to Treasury. They kind of do that sort of CBA stuff. But they do have people in there that can offer advice and assist on occasion when required. So making sure you have a good network of people that you can lean on a little bit also helps.
Thank you, Chris. So the next question, this is probably more suitable for Christine or Brett. So are there differences between working in bigger consulting firms and smaller firms? And who would like to go first, Brett or Christine? Or
Ladies first, right?
I actually only worked for a small consultancy company, so I cannot speak on the bigger ones. A small one, I thought the advantage of working there was a small team. We knew each other, but there was also huge challenges in competing with the big companies. So getting clients was always an issue, finding our own niche, and that came with insecurity of funding, and that I struggled with that. So while there was a lot of like positive vibes between the group and things like that, there was just a huge insecurity on funding. So yeah, that's from the small company side, consultancy side.
Brett?
Yeah, so I mean, I worked at a larger one where, you know, the big emphasis here, I guess when I joined that company, it was a privately owned company, not publicly traded. It had just been bought by a large hedge fund, and so they needed to recoup their investment. So the focus is on generating more profit. And so there isn't, as I alluded to before, there's not much culture other than take on more work and do more work, and make clients happy to get more work. And so I'm not saying that's just my experience. I'm not saying all big consulting firms are like that. I think in my experience now, I work with a lot of vendors, a lot of different vendors. Lots of them are from kind of the big consulting firms, and some of them are from smaller ones. The smaller ones tend to have more of a niche focus. They will have a particular skill set, you know, survival extrapolation they're really good at, or they're really good at complex, you know, indirect treatment comparisons. And so depending on what your need is that you go to whomever, you know, has that particular skill set. Whereas a large company will claim that they have people that can do just about anything. And it might be true in some of the big ones. So to me, I'm not saying that profit motive isn't there in the smaller ones as well, but I feel as though there might be more of a culture in smaller ones because it can be a bit more controlled, and there's probably a single leader there who's driving that. The thing about small successful consulting firms is that they usually get bought out by the bigger ones, and then who knows if that same culture, that uniqueness, that expertise retains, I guess. But yeah, that's just some insight for me.
Thank you. And we have a general question on maybe a student or someone who is new, so interested to get into the field of health economics. What are some specific skills or tools that you need to build, and where can you sharpen those skills? Probably open to any of our panelists who would like to share. It's probably, for me, okay, I don't want to share. Okay, I'll let a lot of panelists speak.
Well, for me, I would say, you know, something, I had an undergraduate degree in biochemistry, and something that took me a long time to develop was, you know, basic statistical knowledge, which I think our field, and it depends what you're doing, I guess, but, you know, our field is advancing. It is becoming, you know, more and more technical. The world is becoming more and more technical. So I think a good grasp of fundamental statistics is probably, you know, a good first step in getting into health economics, and then from there you'll find it easier to understand a lot of things that are happening in our field.
Thanks, Brett. Any other tips from Christine or Christopher or our new friend?
Well, I would just echo what Brett said. I mean, that's pretty much how I got into health economics. I was doing biostatistics, and it was very useful when studying health economics. But then also, I find in practice and application, the statistics side is very, very handy. And it's one skill that a lot of people don't have. So you're always needed.
Thank you. Christine, any tips?
Yeah. In that sense, I'm not a typical health economist, so I'm not sure if I can give the right answers here, because I would say also rather look at, the application and the health system and the policy, but that's probably not the right starting point for a health economist. So keep to the statistics.
Thank you. Right. And our next question is about networking. So do you find networking play a role in assisting your career transitions? And how do you build network in your new field? Anyone would like to try or go share like how
Yeah, I'm happy to go first with this one. To be perfectly honest, networking didn't play any sort of role in my career shift. It was more personally driven. But I think for me, what's important is that those networks that you already established, so the network that I established in academia has followed me through to being in government, and I leverage that network to do all sorts of different things now, and it's been very, very beneficial. So I think, yeah, to answer the first part of the question, didn't play a big role, but is super beneficial in the long term. And the second part of how do you go about building one, you just have to get out there and you just got to talk to people. So for me, it was literally sitting down and going through the email contact list and looking at people's job descriptions and being like, oh, sounds like that person who manages the ED data, they would be pretty good to know if I'm ever looking at an ED intervention. So just email them, hey, how are you? And that would be it.
Thank you. And Brett, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, networking is incredibly important. I would say my current position, I probably talk to 3 or 4 people before even interviewing that company. So essentially had the inside track from 4 or 5 people who had worked there for, going on 4 to 10 years. And that's incredibly important for me at the stage of the career I'm at, that, I'm joining a team that, has good leadership, that has a culture that I can align with, and that I want to work with as well. So I think that was tremendously valuable in getting me into the current position I have, and a reason why I want to continue to stay at that position as well. The other thing I would mention is, health economics is an extremely small world. I was probably somewhat naive when I left Australia after my PhD, thinking, oh, well, Australia's on the other side of the world. I will probably never see a lot of these people again. And boy, was I wrong. So, great opportunity when you go, if you get the chance to go to a conference, make the most out of it. I think most people, we all, probably innately, some people are outgoing and just want to talk to other people, but innately are shy, or think they're going to say something stupid. I think everyone at those conferences is walking around thinking the exact same thing. So don't be afraid to, strike up a conversation. Go to the poster sessions. I mean, that's a pretty easy way. And, think of how many posters there are at some of these conferences. You can have 100 conversations. And over time, it's not something that's just going to happen. You have that, you go to one conference and now you have an established network. But, as you go to the conference in your first year, your second year, and then you'll be 10 years into your career, and you'll realize, well, I know, 2,000 health economists, and you'll go to a conference and you can't even walk around without bumping into a person every 5 seconds. So yeah, you just got to put the effort in, and it's incredibly important. So don't take it for granted.
Thanks, Brett. Thank you, everyone. And we have the next question on background. I think so. Most of the panelists went through academia before moving to the other industries, other sectors. Is this a typical trajectory for health economists? What do you think? From yourself or from the people you see transition to other sectors?
I mean, maybe I actually didn't start in academia. I worked in public health 10 years before I started my academic career. So I think that's a pretty unusual. Usually you do the academic thing first before you do other things. But honestly, I actually thought it was very valuable because I approached my PhD in a very different kind of way as when I would have been fresh out of my master's. I asked different kind of questions, and I see that with my with the PhD students that I have right now. Some of them are in a profession working for HTA bodies or payer organizations. It actually helps reflect on your own research if you're somehow related to another field, even if you work in industry or whatever. So I would advise actually don't rush immediately into a PhD. And before even starting a PhD, I would ask you why you would want to do it. Because I have the feeling that everybody sees a PhD nowadays as an extension of a master's, and that wasn't the case, and not necessarily has to be the case. So yeah, first I would actually advocate for get some experience. Work for 1 or 2 years in a consultancy company or something. See what you actually like and what are you passionate about in terms of topics, and then choose really wisely who you want to do a PhD with in what kind of field, if you even want to go into academia. It's not necessarily a field, even though I'm now in academia, I would not necessarily advocate for going into academia. It's a very stressful field, and depending where you are in which country. But there can be impact can be done in so many other ways, as Brett said too. So I think finding your passion is most important, and then see what would be the right way, and not just say a PhD is a must and academia is a must.
Thank you. What about any thoughts from Christopher or Brett about
I can take a stab. I mean, I think this is a personal choice. You know, I know people that are extremely successful that do not have, haven't spent any time in academia, and they're extremely successful in pharma or in consulting. And there's lots of people who have spent varying times in academia, maybe just did a PhD and then switched over, or did a bit of postdoc and switched over, or, spent a long time in academia and have switched over. So it is a mixed bag. And I think, like Christine said, it's, I wouldn't shut any doors. I think there's a lot of options. We're lucky in that, health economics is kind of an in-demand field, and there are different opportunities. And I think maybe one thing that happens is people get these blinders on, and that I can only be an academic because that's the most prestigious, or that's where I'm going to have the most impact, or that's the most interesting, stuff to me. Well, if you don't kind of explore the other things, and I guess this is the benefit of being a shifter. I've shifted almost everywhere you can shift. And then I've had a little flavor of what it's like in each one of these places. And I've learned what I liked and what I don't like. And that's allowed me to get to a position where, I'm happy, and I'm not trying to jump to some other position or think, oh, I wish I could get that job. You find something that, fits kind of a number of your criteria, and what it's like in other places. And yeah, and I think that's one of the maybe the biggest benefits of kind of moving around and having that open mind, that it doesn't have to just be, you know, academia or nothing, or pharma or nothing. You know, we have the ability to kind of move across, you know, the different sectors, and that's something I would encourage people to take advantage of, because, you know, life is short, and why not have, you know, some different experiences.
Thank you. Any thoughts from you, Christopher?
I think pretty much, you know, that what's already been said is really, really good. Like, when I didn't actually fully leave academia, I still have links to academia, and I feel like my academic work is all the better for the experience that I've managed to get in government now. Like, it's just the different experiences are really, really good to have, whether you like it or you don't like it. It doesn't matter, because ultimately you will hopefully find what you enjoy doing, and then you can pursue it. So just try it.
Thank you. We have 9 more minutes. But we have 3 more questions. So I think we just briefly okay, let's see. Yeah, let's try to cover one more question, and then we'll wrap up. So so this person asked about mentorship, like what role models. Do you have any mentors, role models who guided you through your transitions, and how important was it, and how can ECRs find mentorship outside academia? Maybe just briefly, because of interest of time. Christopher, would you like to start first?
Yeah, sure thing. My, I guess, mentor and role model hasn't been a health economist. It was my former manager who, while I was working for her, I felt like she always had my best interest at heart, and she was instrumental in helping me transition to government. And I think and I want to emphasize, like, importantly, that, you know, she doesn't know anything about health economics, but because she's a good people person, I feel like that was the important part of the mentorship that helped me through that transition. And then in terms of how can you find mentorship outside academia, now that's a bit harder. I haven't had a lot of experience in that. Pretty much the way I found it has just been through general networking. And the more people you talk to, you find people from all sorts of places. And often, you know, people in academia will know people who aren't in academia who could be a good mentor. So it's just about talking and networking.
Christine, or
Yeah, what I would say is, as Christopher said, a mentorship is not necessarily linked to, you know, the role the person has in academia or not academia. It's much more the mentor should see you as a whole and as a full person. So that will also include your personal life and decisions that you can talk through about, moving to another country, so or not, and things like that. So it's much broader than just knowing the mentor, knowing other people you could work with or something like that. So it to me, at least, if I think of a mentor that really influenced me, yes, she was in academia, but that was not the main point. The main point was she saw me as a whole person and understood many of the, you know, transitions, and could guide me through in that way. And how to find that, I don't know that there is a recipe for that. It is also chemistry between people. So yeah, I think being open, and if you maybe see a lecture or a presentation at a conference of somebody that speaks to you in a different way than just the facts, or you have a conversation, then I think, yeah, that might be a way of catching up with a person. But as I said, for me, it is a lot of chemistry and more soft facts again.
And any thoughts from Brett?
Yeah, I guess I mean, agree with what's largely already been said. I think the only difference maybe that I would highlight is kind of, it doesn't have to be a single person as well. There's not like one mentor you have in your entire life and they give you all the wisdom that you need to kind of navigate your career. I think it's important to have multiple perspectives when kind of navigating your career, and take that information and take that along with what someone else said and synthesize that to make, what decision is ultimately best for yourself. I moved from, working at the University of Oxford to move to Singapore, and people thought I was crazy. One of the people that I was a mentor at the time, didn't necessarily understand why I was doing that. And, that's fine. There was lots of other people that, maybe encouraged me to do it or not, but I wouldn't have considered those people mentors. So I guess just, the more kind of wisdom you can take from multiple people, probably the better, rather than kind of seeking out one sole person that is going to help you along your career journey. And finding that person, again, it's just about networking, because you never know kind of the trajectory of, people's careers, and people that you did a master's with, 10 years later end up being, the president of a company, or being some big shot professor, or working in government somewhere, and they bring a different perspective and they introduce you to people. So I think it's the importance of networking there, and it will happen organically and naturally kind of when you do find someone who's willing to support you and mentor you. But again, don't put all your eggs in one basket, I guess.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you. So 3 more minutes. Maybe we just hear maybe half a minute from each of you. What is the most important advice you would give to an early career researchers who are contemplating to move to a different sector? Who would like to start first? So most important advice you would give to early career researchers who are contemplating a move to a different sector.
I'm happy to go first. And I think, I think we've kind of said this already, is that you are thinking about it, do it. Why not? Like I said, life is short. Your career is relatively short. Have a new experience, challenge yourself, learn something new, figure out if you like it or if you don't like it. That's not a bad thing. If you move and you go, I hate this, and you move on, you transition back. So I think this panel has shown that, just be open to the experience and take it for what it is, and don't be afraid, challenge yourself and grow. And ultimately you'll eventually find that position or that career trajectory that makes you happy, I think.
Right. Christine or Christopher? Christopher, yes, please.
Yeah, I think I'd just echo pretty much what Brett said. Like, I think sometimes when people hear that you're a health economist, they think that you're quite niche, but we're not. There's a lot of amazing things that we do, and I think it's really important that we get out there and we try them all to find what we like. So if your personal circumstances line up, just go for it. Like, I was very hesitant to move into government, and there's some great things about it, and there's some not so great things about it. But the experience has been absolutely incredible. And I know that, moving forward in my career, I will absolutely benefit from everything that I've learned in both academia and government. And I wouldn't change that. So just do it.
Thank you.
Yeah, a last sentence from my side. I totally agree. And I think don't overthink it, just do it. There's never a mistake that you can do, in the sense, because you will always learn something. Even if you learn that that's not for you, that's also learning. So yeah, just try it out. Just try it out.
Thank you so much. So we just at 10:30, which is the time. Let's give we can't you can't clap, but let's give a virtual applause to our three panelists. Thank you very much for their time, and thank you to you two for attending the session. I think that's it. So I sent the feedback form, the link to the feedback form and the QR code in the chat earlier. So before you leave, we'll appreciate if you could give us some comments on how we did, what you like or dislike. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you in our next event. And again, if you haven't, virtual applause again to our panelists. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for your time and contribution. Really appreciate very interesting insights to your experiences, and which also makes me think about my career. So yeah, thank you. So
Thank you, everyone. Good luck. Take care. Bye bye.
Yes, thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.